Good morning. We'll call the Monday morning, April 19th, 2021 meeting of the Redistricting Committee to order. Start with roll call, please.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Mr. Payton?
Present.
Mr. Seroy?
Present.
Ms. Weber? Present. Ms. Parker? Ms. Polk?
Present.
Mr. Featherling?
Present.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Collins? We have a quorum.
Just to start with, this is an informational meeting today. There will be no votes, no motions, or anything like that today, so. Okay, you want to put up the PowerPoint, Kelly?
Chair?
Yes. Should be, yeah. Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Chairman, might we interrupt, not necessarily interrupt, but interject questions during the presentations, or do we have to wait till, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the process, go to your next slide. Okay, all the legal parameters will be done by Mr. Rowe, our state's attorney. We want to become proficient in legal requirements of your task and the timelines. We want to have a robust discussion and debate and the passage of foundational apportionment, boy, I didn't think I was going to get that one right, recommendations by this committee to send to the full board for a final vote. And after foundational information has been ratified by the full board, choose a final map to be sent to the June full board meeting for final approval. Sam?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the history. The last time the Kankakee Board reported district was in 2011. The board kept the size of the county board at 28 members with a 28 single member county board. There was the advisory reference prior to this in 2010, whereas the public voted 54% in favor of a 28 single member district. There was an additional advisory referendum in 2017 where the majority of the public input was in favor of 21 county board members. But the question was silent on the makeup of the district, single or multiple district. Currently, the next deadline to reapportion the determined size of the county board is the first regular scheduled county board meeting of July 2021.
We'll go into the legal requirements for reapportionment. Mr. Rowe. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The mission. We should debate and vote on board members' compensation type, per diem or salary. Debate and vote on electing members by the district or at large. Debate and vote multi-member or single-member districts. Compensation for board members, the chairman, and the liquor commissioner. Debate and vote on deploying an online mapping tool for the public or a manual paper process for the public input. View all the presentations of sample maps for 28, 24, 21, 18, and 10 county board districts. And debate on vote regarding total number of single or multi-member districts. Now we'll go on to the legal responsibilities of the county board. Mr. Rowe.
So the board's legal responsibilities, the board's legal responsibilities through this process is to determine the size of the county board, how members shall be elected, their compensation, the terms of those board members, and then there's a few other matters I want to touch on. But we'll go through each of these individually. When you determine the size of the county board, you go to the next slide. Thanks. It's somewhat simple to for anyone to sit down and draw some lines on a map and say this is how many districts and this is where the districts will be, but they've got to be of equal size. They've got to be contiguous. They've got to be compact. So that has to be taken into consideration. But one of the,
Mr. Hunter?
You know, for example, how can you say they must be comparable in terms of size? For example, Commissioner Payton has Pembroke Township, 52 square miles, compared to what I have in district.
population.
Population
that's
wise.
fine.
Population.
When you said size, I said, no, that's okay.
Yeah, population.
In terms of population.
So one of the first things the board's going to want to determine is ultimately the size of the county board. And that comes down to how many county board members are you going to have. And if you're going to stick with single member districts, then it'd be one district, one member per district. If you're going to go to multi-member districts, you determine how many districts, and then that'll determine how many members you'll have. If you can go to the next slide. So by law, you've got to have at least 5, and you could go as many as 29 members. Of course, currently we have 28. Here's a comparison. I just noticed that the numbers on this chart do not align with the numbers on a chart that's later in the presentation with Chairman Wheeler, so I'll verify. I'll verify to see which of these are accurate, and if these are inaccurate, I'll update this chart. But it just kind of gives you an idea where you're looking at counties with similar to ours or populations at least over 100,000. It gives you an idea of how many board members, how many districts. In some you'll see few districts, but those are clearly multi-member districts, so you have almost an equivalent number of county board members. I think on that list the smallest is what, 18, and it does go all the way up to 29 in a few instances. So you know, I wouldn't say Kankakee County is an outlier, but again, it's up to the board to decide if they want to remain at 28 districts, if they want to go to 29 or fewer than 28. If you want to go to the next slide. So the number of board districts that you ultimately decide on is going to be decided by a majority vote. This is your one opportunity really to decide that. It's because there's a decennial census every 10 years. And during that reapportionment process, you can decide if you want to move that number up to 29 or down. You will not have another opportunity to change the number of county board districts until 2031. Next slide. And when you make those considerations, when you're looking at how many county board districts you're going to decide on, these are some of the things you need to make sure you keep in mind. Each district shall be substantially equal in population to each other district. This goes to just that core right of one person, one vote. In an ideal world, if you had 28 districts and just for a number you had 1,000 people or 28,000 people in the county, you'd have 1,000 people per district. So each 1,000 people would get one county board vote. That's probably impossible to do, to make sure that you have an exactly equal number of people who reside in each district. And of course, people move during those that 10-year period. So you're never probably going to have a perfect situation where it is one person, one vote, but ultimately that's the goal. Even the law recognizes that. They want it to be as equal as practicable. And the key here is if you do deviate, and there's going to be deviation. Again, we're never going to have a map where every district has the exact number of people residing in it. When you do deviate, we have to be able to justify that. So I would say that any final plan that the board comes forward with should be able to deviate, or should be able to justify why there's a deviation in one district, maybe with greater population and fewer population in another district. Let's see. And it says, you know, I guess the one law out of Madison County is greater equality cannot be practicable given the current state of technology. That's why it's great that you have the program you have, because we're going to be able to show based on how you can move those lines in the program or change the map, we're going to be able to show why it's not practicable. And so the ability to document that's going to be a lot easier with the use of that software. I'll go to the next one. So again, deviation has to be as minimal as possible, demonstrated and documented that it, more equality of population can't be obtained.
Commercial.
One other number, when we look at deviation, we want to keep the deviation as small as possible. So if it's around 1%, 2%, 3%, that's really good. There are some cases out there. Chairman Wheeler sent me something. Was it from, where did that come from?
It was the lawyer for United Council. Excuse me, it was the lawyer for UCCI.
Yep.
Had said that case law had established no more than 10%.
Yeah, 10% is a really large deviation.
Yeah.
And if you get over 10%, you're probably pushing an illegal map. I think if you get close to 10%, we really better reevaluate that. Because I'm sure that we can get a more equality of representation across the districts, far better than 10%.
Yes.
Is that voter age people, or is that
That's population.
just period? So
Population.
a baby is a one vote, one person, one vote?
One person, one vote. They have representation too, even though they
Yeah.
can't vote for the representative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Searice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowe, we're not gonna get the true census numbers till when, so how would the deviation, if we've set this all up and are setting our goal and then the census numbers come out and we're like, wow, it's over 10%, is that reasonable? Because we're not caused to have the population change when we didn't know there was a change.
Sure. So I've talked with Chairman Wheeler about this. We're hoping that something comes out of Springfield that delays the time within which the board has to pass these maps, because you'd really like to make sure you have that new data. And I think the data is delayed until at least, are they saying October, November? September. Yeah. The challenge, of course, is that if they delay that, then your electoral cycle probably has to change, because you have to vote within your district, and that's going to push maybe the primary, March's primary into next fall, and you can't change the November election.
Right.
So I don't know what they're going to do. We're going to do the best we can to get a good map, and if we have to base it on the last census data, that's what we're going to have to do, because we're not going to blow a deadline.
Okay.
Now, if the state extends it, it gives us a reprieve and we can wait.
And
but if they don't, we're going to have to pass a map.
So basing it on last year's or last 10-year census would be correct, or
I'd say that's the only data we have at that point.
okay, acceptable.
That was what the lawyers at UCCI had said in their analysis, and Steve was there, and I believe ASA Coghlan was there as well, that unlike the state legislature and Senate and even congressional districts, they don't use the word census. For county boards, they use the word census, but they don't say the one from this year. They just say the last census. So the last one would be 10 years ago. So that's why we're pushing forward to get this done, because we do have a census to base it on. Then if something else happens, we can tweak it based on the population shifts that have happened. Does that make sense? So there's no reason to stop and wait, because that only hurts us.
And the statute says we have to have it done by July.
You have to have
Correct.
it really done at the June full board meeting. July is the emergency.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. When we talk about compactness, I think we all probably have a different idea of what that word means. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court hasn't given us much input or clarity on what that means within the context of redistricting. They have an eyeball test. You know it when you see it. That's great for lawyers. It's terrible for everybody else. But I think we all kind of understand when you talk about a district being compact, you know, you don't want to have that one alley that goes down and then another circle with a donut hole. That's not what we're looking for here. Yeah.
So no Rorschach, right?
What's that?
No Rorschach, you know?
No, not like, no.
Okay.
No. No, so you want it to be compact. If it can be all squares, that would be fantastic. I don't know that it can be or will be, but as compact as possible. And again, if something, if it appears to deviate a little bit, if there's a border that maybe makes it appear in the eyeball test that it's not compact, we've got to make sure that our ultimate plan explains that. Whether it's a footnote or not, it needs to be documented why that was necessary. And of course, compactness is subservient to the equality of population, because that one person, one vote is much more important than having a perfectly square district. The next one is contiguity. Distinct and unbroken, adjoin each other in a reasonably substantial physical sense. Again, unfortunately, they go back to the eyeball test. They say it's relatively easy to verify by a visual inspection of the districting plan. This is that, you know, the donut hole scenario, which used to exist when they would draw, especially like state legislative maps. Sometimes you'd see that, and they did that, obviously, to gerrymander a district to create a certain result. So we want to make sure we avoid that. I cannot imagine. Well, they say contiguous as possible. I cannot imagine where we would have a district that's not, and I don't think we should. Yep.
Mr. Wheeler.
The only thing outside of that is the river that bisects throughout. There may be because if you have to grab population, you may have to cross the river.
Yeah.
But that's only when you make a determination on the final map.
Yep. Yep.
So
and we
that's
would
really
just
the
explain that. That would be reasonable.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you're on the next slide. Yep. So, and we always have to keep in mind that these maps cannot have a discriminatory result. That's different than what it used to be in the past. For a very long time, they would look at the intent of the map, and someone that wanted to come in and challenge the map, it didn't matter what the outcome was. What mattered was what was the intent when they were creating the map, and if they could, they would have to prove, which is a pretty high hurdle, that the drafters of the map intended to discriminate, that they intended to dilute a minority vote. And now the courts say that that's not what you have to show. All they need to show now is that the end result has a disparate impact upon minority residents. So if you were to take for instance, if you were to take a community with a high minority population and then break them off into a dozen districts where they were really diluted and then they weren't a majority in any district, that has a disparate impact. So we want to make sure that that's not what the final map does. I don't believe it will. All right, are there any questions on determining the size of the county board? The reason all that's under there is because it all comes into how many districts you're going to have. You can pick a number out of the blue. You can say we're going to go with 14, we're going to go with 21. But you've got to be able to draw a map that has a quality of population, contiguous, and compact districts. So, you know, one doesn't necessarily drive the other. I think before you can figure out a number, you've got to see what's feasible within the bounds of the law, with the requirements you need to meet for each district. So it's challenging. It's not as simple as just picking a number and then trying to draw squares on a map. So, any questions about that?
Ms. Weber.
There was one of the slides, it emphasizes not dividing townships and municipalities, only one, and the other that may be very difficult is not to divide a precinct between two or more districts. Those could be really hardships.
Sure. Yeah, that creates a challenge. The precincts, though, that's as much as practicable. You can cross a precinct line, but again, you've got to be able to document why you had to do that. And really the reason for needing to do that should probably come back to that equality of population, trying to get the minimum deviation. Determining how board members are elected, that's by district or at large. Obviously right now you elect them by district. If everyone ran at large, that'd be a heck of a lot of campaigns to have 28 county board members running at large. So, but that is something you'll need to decide in the final plan. If you're going to change from that, God help us.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, and I mentioned this earlier, why would you want an election at large? You would have somebody representing you that doesn't even live in your area.
Very possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would be the top 28 vote getters, correct?
Correct.
So you could have 15 people from Kankakee 8 from Mantino, stuff like that. Nothing
Correct.
from the unincorporated areas.
Yep. You know, maybe an example of that, not that it's bad or good, but just an example, is that District 111, their members, school board members are elected at large, and I believe a part of that district encompasses Aroma Park. So what's that? Bradley? So you have areas within the district, so the majority of your votes are obviously in the city of Kankakee. I believe all the members on the board are from the city of Kankakee, but you have other areas within that district. And John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of an example of what Mr. Hess is talking about.
Ms. Weber?
Well, the Moment School District is an example of difficulty. If there's a district part that no one wants to run in, that puts that whole population without a representative.
That they're fractional district.
Yep.
You know, so.
Yep.
I also think that,
Oh, Mr. Collins.
thanks. I think that living in Kankakee County or in Illinois in general, we deal with, we were talking about townships and not splitting up townships when we redistrict here, but there's only 20 states in our entire country that still have things like townships. So I think that when we look at electing from a different way with as opposed to at large or by district, if you were in a situation where we had 5 county board members for the entire county, it would make a little bit more sense to let people run at large. Whereas you have areas where it's trouble finding somebody to run when you only have 4 people making the decisions instead of 28. It's a thing where a county can look at itself as one unit rather than 28 microcosms or the 17 different districts that we have for our townships. I see a lot in our county. One of the biggest hurdles I see is all the different townships create almost like a, excuse me, catch my breath here. They create like they're little packs of people all over. It's tribalism through our county. Growing up in this county, I've noticed like people that have such huge pride in their township that it ultimately creates more government and overlap and waste. So when one of the things that I want to bring to the table here, looking at keeping 28 members, I know that there's a lot of talk of downsizing the board for various reasons, but I think that our general population doesn't realize that county board members are one of the best representations in our county. We don't get paid very much. We represent small groups of people, and I think it's a good reason to keep at 28 people, just to keep from disenfranchising anybody in the smaller areas when we go to combine those districts. So just going forward, I think that being at large would make a lot more sense if you were in a district that didn't have so many governing bodies. But being the way it is, I think that 28 people is the more we can have to keep people in check of small governing bodies. People that make $3,000 a year, if they show up to every meeting, are more valuable to me than 4 people that make $100,000 a year and don't have to have any sort of a, you know, recourse to their constituents. You know, yeah, absolutely. When the bigger the district you get, the less accountability you have to your people. So I think that a larger board is more representative of our community. That's all. Sorry.
Thank you.
One thing also, you know, there's some characteristics of Kankakee County that make us very unique. Of course, you have the mix of rural and urban, but then as Chairman Wheeler often points out, you also have a majority-minority rural area, which in drawing a map to ensure that you do not have that disparate impact on Pembroke Township, so to say, or Sun River Terrace, that poses a challenge. So you wouldn't want a situation where suddenly it was at large and then there's zero representation from maybe the rural community. So yeah, districts, I think, you know, districts certainly make sense for Kankakee County, the number, but again, this is the only opportunity you have to accomplish that if you were to change it to electing them at large. Next, determination of compensation. This is where you have to determine the compensation for members of the county board, how you're going to pay that salary, per diem, annual, or combined basis. and then you fix that salary for county board members, and then the additional compensation to be paid to the county board chairman. This can always be amended later, but the changes you make are not going to go into effect until that member from that district is in their next term. So it's not like you're changing your salary, you're changing the salary for whoever may occupy the seat next. Yep. So that's something the board's gonna need to do and put into its plan. Next up, we have terms of county board members. So this doesn't need to be done until after the reapportionment process, which is prior to September 1st of 2022. But this is where you put them in lots, and I don't know if you guys draw straws, but normally I think it's probably even or odd. And you pick the even one, and then the evens get 2 years, odds get 4 years. I think that's how it's been done in the past.
Ping pong balls.
Ping pong balls, okay.
Ping pong balls.
All right. Yeah, but it has been even odd, I think, is the split, and that makes the most sense because you want it to be proportionate on both sides. Now, of course, if you went to multi-member districts, that process changes. And last, when we talk about other considerations, openness, Open Meetings Act, court scrutiny of the process. So I can tell you that in many instances, there have been cases when there have been challenges. Rubicki 1 was one of them, Ketchum, I think it was Morgan County or Madison County. The courts look to make sure that the process was fair, that it was public, that the public had an opportunity to appear, public had an opportunity to be heard. They're looking to see how many people ultimately drew the map, were involved in that process. How long did that process take place? You know, did the board come in June and present one option to the board and say, we have to pass it? The deadline's coming, and force that map through. So that's what the courts look at. I think that what you're doing here by having this committee, by having a number of representatives from the committee, and the representatives of this committee really do represent some of the urban community, the rural community, majority minority rural community. I think that's good representation, a good number of members. It's a public process. People are able to appear in person as well as it's being broadcast online. I believe it'll be on YouTube. You're having multiple meetings. Anyone's going to be able to bring a map forward, as long as it meets with you know, scrutiny that the courts would apply or someone challenging it would apply. The board's going to be able to consider those maps.
Mr. Searoy's first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to piggyback on what you're saying, Mr. Rowe, our next meeting is April 26th. Our next meeting after that is May 3rd. Next meeting is May 10th, then May 17th, then May 24th. So you know, for the public that might pick up on what you're saying and wonder how come they weren't informed on this meeting, there was their information. So, thank you.
Mr. Featherling.
No, I think that kind of hit what I was going for there. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we were gonna stick with the same schedule and everything.
Yep.
And you know, the board, I mean, really, there's counties, there's governmental bodies that do not make this a public process. Those maps are created in back rooms and no one has much input into it. And if the board decided we were only gonna have 4 or 5 people, so you have less than a majority of a quorum, you wouldn't even be subject to the Open Meetings Act. You could sit in a room and draw that map and then present it to the board. So this is a very open process, and I think that that's the best practice. The other thing, that advisory referendum, so there's a case, Ketchum, and probably Rubicki 1 as well, that if someone were to come and they were to challenge a map, I would rather be able to go into court and say the county board considered the referendum results. What year was that? 2017? 2018?
2010 was the first one, 2017 was the second one.
2017? I have it right up there, 2017 advisory referendum. I would rather be able to go into court and say it was discussed, it was considered, and here's why they followed it. Or it was discussed and it was considered and here's why they weren't able to go to 21 21 county board members, or this is why they went to 24, why they had to stay at 28. But I do think that that should at least form part of your discussions, to recognize that that was the vote of the people in 2017, and their input is important to this process. Now, I don't know if 21 is even a feasible map, right? That was the number that was floated in the referendum. Maybe it would never be possible to have a county board with 21 county board districts. But regardless of what you decide, I do think that that should at least be part of your conversations and considerations, so we could always go in and justify why there's a deviation from that.
Mr. Wheeler.
Question. In 2010, the public voted for a 28 single district member board, and so the one in 2017 said 21. It was silent on the other part of it. So there's a consideration where they conflict. Do you go with, which one do you go with? Which one does the courts go with? I mean, it's just advisory at that point. It's not a referendum to
Correct.
do that. So I'm just trying to figure out,
Do you recall
how should
how-
they weigh that?
Was it worded 21 county board members or county board districts?
I think it said members, didn't it? I can't remember.
Or was it
I'd have
reduced the size of the county board from 28
to 21?
21? We'd probably have to look back at the exact language of that, but I think it should be considered.
Both
You
of
know,
them should be considered.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would imagine the 2010 was considered in the reapportionment in 2011. But I think that should be part of the discussion too, if you decide. I'm not saying that you can't consider the 2010 referendum, but I'm just saying that I do think the board should at least discuss the 2017 referendum. It's most recent, and it actually supported a reduction of the board size. Again, it's advisory, right? It's not mandatory. The board's hand isn't being forced here, but just to make sure that that final plan at least considers that and allows us down the road, if we had to go into court and say, the board considered it, here's why it wasn't feasible. Or here's why, in light of the consideration of that referendum, this is why this map that the board decided upon is the best map. If you went in and the court said, well, did you even consider the will of the people's vote from 2017, and we have to say no, that's not a good starting point in any case.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Hang on, Ms. Weber first.
I was looking at this chart saying that the population per district was, or is now 4,052 people, and that, is that the starting point since we don't have a new census number?
Those numbers, yeah, those numbers would be the numbers until we get a new census.
Mr. Hunter.
For those of you who were around here when you decided upon 28 single member districts, can you articulate, 3 reasons as to why that was established and determined?
Just you, Bones.
I got on at 28 members.
Yeah.
Can anybody remember? Well, Lear, what about you? You've been around here for a while.
Would you repeat the question?
Okay. For those of you who were around here, when the 28 single member districts were established, what was the essential justification for making that determination?
I wasn't on the board at that time either. I came after Chairman Hess, but I have heard reports saying that it was linked to the number of townships that were in existence. So I think it had something to do with the number of townships.
Anybody else have any memory?
Years ago, I believe the board started out as the supervisors, did it not?
They did.
County board supervisors. Go ahead, Carol.
Did you say township supervisors then? Or county board supervisors?
Township, yeah, township supervisors, right.
Ah.
That's how it started. Mr. Wheeler.
At some point before the 28, and it would have had to been on the 10-year cycle, it was 7 4-member districts. And then it was intentionally changed to go to 28 from what I remember people talking about back when I first got on the board, it had something to do with also having a representative that was truly representative of the area that they were in. It was, you know, you could have 4 people that were from one area, and then some, like we were talking before, then there's nobody from Hopkins Park. You know, that scenario could play out. If it could be one whole neighborhood block of 4 people that got elected, and then the whole rest of the district had nobody around. So I think that was one of the reasons as well, as I remember. Mr. Tripp talking about it back in the day.
I think that was 28 came in at 2,000, I believe, didn't it?
It would had to have, yeah. Yeah, it would have had to have, because it's on a 10-year cycle.
Right.
Yeah. 2001.
Mr. Hunter.
Just, can someone do some research on that and bring back some,
In your spare time, Chairman Wheeler?
or
I could try to.
or the clerk?
Someone who's still around that could. Historian? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who was chairman then?
2000.
Pictures.
Might have been Bruce Hewitt.
Go back to the black and white ones.
Marwood Hendricks?
Oh, Marwood, yeah. That's a guy.
Maybe Carl has some information.
Well, he said the mic's got it.
I check with Carl.
Okay.
Thank you.
One last thing I should advise the board of, a failure to complete reapportionment. So Chairman Wheeler noted that July 13th is the county's board meeting for the month of July. By statute, the plan has to be completed and on file with the county clerk by the day after that meeting. So that puts us to July 14th, 2021 as a final deadline. Ideally, it would be approved at the board's June meeting. If that were to fail to be completed by July 14th, the county clerk would then convene a 3-member county apportionment commission. That commission would have until October to submit its apportionment plan. If that wasn't filed by that date in October, then all the county board members would be elected at large, and you'd have 29. So let's get it done in June.
Mr. Lear.
Does that statute indicate the makeup of what the clerk appoints?
For that county apportionment commission, I didn't notice it in there. I'd have to check to see.
I think I heard there is a provision.
I'll check and see, and I'll have that for the next meeting.
Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, my final comments is that I really appreciate the effort that was, put forth in this document here. It's clear to me, it's concise, and it's not a lot of hyperbole and legalese stuff at all. Anybody with some brain cells could probably understand this stuff. I mean, it doesn't speak over our heads. I like also the presentations by all of you in the beginning, and especially State's Attorney Rowe. Also, the chairman called us in and discussed this as well too before this meeting, which makes sense in terms of what to expect. He wanted feedback in terms of this document and what you guys were going to present. And I think what has happened, in my estimation, is Durkheim's 8 stages of man: trust versus mistrust. And I trust this document and the statements and presentations that you guys have presented. Additionally, being really open to questioning of the documents and the information that's herein contained. Good job, guys.
Mr. Wheeler.
Just a point of clarification, groups of 2.
Correct.
As to not violate a majority of a quorum. I just want to make sure it's on the record.
Any other questions for Mr. Rowe before we move on?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And it's nice to see you in public.
Good to see you.
Size of the county board. Mr. Wheeler.
As Mr. Rowe had said, that's one of the, you know, the main things that we have to do under this process. It's really, you know, it's the payoff at the end. It's probably the last thing we'll vote on, to be honest. We can get everything ready to go, and I think that's the way the agendas will go in the future, is to get some of the, I don't want to say light reading out of the way, if you will, and then focus on the number and things like that of how many, and we still haven't put together that presentation completely, but that's the way we're leaning. Now, just wanted to let this group know and the public know that we're trying to bring resources to bear on why or why not, why to more representation is better, when it's better, when less representation is better, you know, the whys and the why nots, and be able to put some things behind it. But there is no definitive source that says, you know, if you have this many residents, it needs to be this many people. There's reasons to go either way, and that's what I think the group should talk about, much to Jim's point of you know, you guys have that debate in this committee on the pros and the cons. And then if the numbers are 18 or 10, the smallest in Illinois is 10 for a county board that operates under township form of government. They voted to do that, oh, I want to say 20 years ago. Kendall County has 10. Each board representative, they have 2 5-member districts, and everybody's got about, I thought it was 51,000, you know, I believe, yeah, 51,000 residents. Want to make sure I find that. It's not on, it's on my list here. Hold on just a second here. Yeah, 57,368 residents, but they all get paid $17,500 a year. So do the math. That's twice what we pay for our county board here. So it may sound good, but then you're going to have full-time people. So there's going to be reasons why and why not, and we should have that conversation. Just, you know, of these county boards, and by the way, the number's the same, they're just ordered differently, Jim. I was looking at some of the population numbers. They're just out of order.
Yeah, the population was the same, but I noticed the number of county board members, districts seems different. I'm not sure where that comes in, but I'll check.
It could be multi-member, like it divided in 2, yeah. So 9 feature multi-member districts, 11 consist of single-member districts. 19 of the 20 county boards have between 17 and 29 county board members. The average board composition in these 20 counties is 24 members, rounded up from 23.11, because it can't be a prime number. If half the board's up for a re-election every 2 years, you can't have a prime number, because it just doesn't divide evenly. So 21 can be done, because you can have 3 groups. You know, it could be 2, 4, and 4. 4, 4, and 2, and then 4, 2, 4 as far as the years. So you could do it if you went to 21, if the map is viable, obviously, and population can be equalized with all the other Voting Rights Act stuff to be considered as well. So that's all I wanted to point out. That resource is there. It's on the record. People can take a look at it. Compensate, you know, price is not cost. So I think people should take a look at that as well. When you start adding up the total cost of the Kankakee County Board, I think people will see, compared to the other counties, we're towards the bottom as far as what it costs taxpayers. It's about 75 cents per resident per year is the math that we worked out for the county board. So, as it is now.
And as Mr. Collins says, the lower number that you have, you don't have the diversity there, and there's going to be you would be on more committees, and you're not going to have the choice, you know, to bring to the board. I mean, you're going to have, say, 21 members. If 14 of their, no, you wouldn't be that. 21 would be, what, 13 would be 26, 12. If 12 people voted for it and it passes, you know, you give that chance, the more districts you have and the more people you have to make better decisions, I believe. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also think there's a huge public breakdown in understanding how the county level government works, and separate from, I mean, until I was elected to this position, I had no idea how different other states run their local governments on the county level. To find out that there's only 20 states that have any form of township government whatsoever in the entire country. Townships are, quite frankly, archaic. they're outdated, and they cost lots of money, and they lead to districting issues when it comes to redistricting our county board here. Like we said earlier, we try not to cross township lines. And like I said too, the tribalism that breaks down in a county level, rather than everybody's saying we live in Kankakee County and we want to do what's best for Kankakee County, we have people that are, I live in Rockville Township and I want to do what's best for Rockville Township, or I live in Ottawa Township, and all these breakdowns. When it comes to the county board, like we said, the low pay that we have and the representation that we give people, I think is the most bang for the buck, and it's something that I'm learning more and more every day now that I've been on the board, how much more functional it is in comparison to the other forms of government, the overlapping forms of government that we have in this county that are much more expensive to our taxpayers, and arguably much, much less representative to them. So I think that going forward, we need to work on the public understanding really where their tax money goes on the county level, and where their tax, the things that eat their tax money the most. And by far, it's not $3,000 a year county board members, with the exception of, I mean, that's based on your per diem. You really want to look at the things that are killing your tax base here in the county. It's school districts, the waste that comes with multiple townships. And I think that, yeah, once again, keeping the board as large as we can and low paying, and keeping the expectations of all 28 of our members as high as possible is really going to give us the most representation for our people going forward. And I know that there's a lot of people in our county that hear 28 members and think, my God, why do you need 28 people to represent 110,000 people? And what they're missing, like I said, is the low pay that it costs. You could cut our county board in half and you're saving, one salary a year roughly. If you cut 14 members out at roughly $3,000 a year, you're losing a lot of representation to not save a lot of money. So I think we could work on educating the public more too, as far as what happens on the county level with your tax dollars and how your representation fails when you cut out county board members.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wheeler?
I'm done. Yep.
Okay, our next meeting and the agenda. We're going to debate and vote on the board member compensation type, per diem or salary. We'll debate and vote on electing members by district or at large. We'll debate and vote on multi-member or single-member districts. The compensation for board members, for the chairman and the liquor commissioner. Debate and vote on deploying an online mapping tool for the public or a manual paper process for the public input. View presentations of sample maps for 28, 24, 21, 18, and 10 county board districts. And debate and vote regarding the total number of single or multi-member districts. Okay, board member comments. Any board member comments? Mr. Searice?
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, no, we're not there yet. Hang on one second. And then you're out of line anyway. Oh, yeah, Mr. Kirker's not on the committee, so.
I was in the back row, I figured it would give it a try.
Can I say something?
Yes, yes, you can.
I think one thing that is key to this process is it's very easy for someone to come forward and scream no when they see a map or any map, and to be against everything. We see that often, but it's a challenge for them to bring their own map to the table. So I think, I know when people talk to me about this issue, I always punt and say it's up to the county board to do it, but I'm going to encourage them in those discussions. If you don't like what you see, then bring your own map and make sure that it's contiguous, that it's compact, and that it's got equality of population. That is not a simple process. So it's easy to say no. It's a whole lot harder to bring ideas to the table. So whether it's fellow board members or community members, I hope you encourage them. If they don't like what they're hearing, they can come to the meetings, but bring something to the table.
And for knowledge for everybody, all the district maps are online, so. Any public comment? Any public comment at this time? Mr. Wheeler?
I just thought it might be good to explain. Normally, we have public comment at the beginning of the meetings, and I thought during this process, it might be good if we had public comment at the end, so they could have heard what has gone on, and then comment on that. So for the next meeting, I will put another public comment, actually for the first item on the agenda, and then right before the final vote. So they'll be able to respond to what they heard today via public comment. We'll go through and hopefully get some of the, I want to say, lightweight stuff out of the way. And then you could have that robust debate about those issues that may be contentious. And before you vote, get public comment at that point as well. Then come back for the vote. I thought that's probably the best way to go about it, because once this process is done, then, and say we've chosen, or the board, this committee has chosen, you'll send what you've chosen to the full board, they'll approve it or disapprove it, amend it, whatever. Then it will be, now we need to draw different versions of that map for this committee to reconvene and decide which map they're gonna recommend to the full board. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a broken, you know, we're disjoining things at one point. We're gonna kind of stop once you've made your decision. Full board will vote, then we'll come back and look at different versions of what was approved. And then approve that, send it to the full board for June. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
If the census comes out then, like in September, will we be able to readjust the maps, or do we have to wait on the state to make that decision?
Legislation's gonna have to determine that, because it's pretty clear you've gotta have it by that date in July.
Right.
Any extension beyond that, the state's gonna have to grant that authority.
But the good thing is, if we do this now and they do something right up the last minute, and say you have until September, well, all we have to do is a quick adjustment to rebalance the numbers. We've already got essentially a map. It can be rebalanced, this committee get back together again, say, yeah, this is okay, send it to the full board. But at least we have something done and ready to start with, if it happens.
Maybe at the next meeting too, I think it would be good if not only the board, but the public could understand that Maptitude software. So I didn't understand it until I saw it play out. You can put all the data in and it kicks out a map, and those are roughly equally populated districts, but it doesn't take into effect or into consideration compactness, contiguity. It doesn't take into consideration you can't cross certain boundaries, precincts. So that map that it spits out is not, it's not possible. It wouldn't be legal for that to be a final map. So adjustments have to be made to it. And I think, you know, you would like to think that the software is could just pump out a fair map, and it's just not built to do that.
Mr. Featherly.
Is there anything that's been challenged about the map that we have right now and the way the districts are divided, except for the referendum that was on the ballot?
No, there was no challenges to the last one.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, as Mr. Seroy said earlier, the future meeting schedule is going to be every Monday, starting today, then April 26th, May 3rd, 10, 17, 24, and June 7th, if we have to have it ready before the board meeting. I would entertain a motion to adjourn, Mr. Seroy, from the back row. Second by Mr. Collins from the back row. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign.